A revolt against American hegemony begins in Europe. This is an article by Sergei Savchuk on Associated France Press by Ludovic Marin. Now we know that the new Prime Minister of Britain, Rishi Sunak, claimed that the United Kingdom will not be supporting Ukraine anymore because of the economic situation in England. They can't afford to do that anymore. Now we have a new revolt against American hegemony having to do with other member states of Europe. The other day, the leaders of Germany and France met in Paris, and as usual, the main topic of discussion was not Ukraine. As Politico reports, during the meeting of Olaf Scholz of Germany and Emmanuel Macron of France, they discussed the current situation in which the United States is withdrawing the thickest and most profitable industrial and economic cream in the form of large industries, in particular automotive companies that have actively moved to the other side of the ocean in recent months because things are so expensive to produce in Europe. So you can understand when the energy costs are so high in Europe, of course companies are going to go across the Atlantic to the US. So they can't afford to be losing their corporations. Obviously, they have to make some kind of a decision. The leaders of the EU's two richest, most powerful countries, despite recent chilling personal relations, have unanimously decided that tolerance of this previously covert and now open robbery by Washington is no longer tolerable. To understand the dynamics of what's happening, consider the course of events in chronological order. We should start on August 16, when Joe Biden signed the so-called Deflation Act, which includes tangible cuts to healthcare spending, tax reform, and continued greening of the nation's energy sector. That's what the preamble says, and anyone with a modicum of legal knowledge will tell you that the most important and dangerous stuff is on the last page with a small print, the smallest possible print. The main victims are the countries of the European Union, which are typically not part of the United States nor signatories to this legislation, because the fine print on the conventional last page of the Deflation Act spells out broad appropriations to expand and strengthen the American real sector. In particular, billions of dollars are allocated from the budget to subsidize foreign companies that decide to break with the past and connect their futures with America. In principle, it's difficult to single out a month in which the EU has passed without tensions and disturbances since the start of Russia's special Operation Ukraine. However, August perhaps deserves to be singled out for the reason that EU heads of state were extremely busy looking for money to help the Ukrainian army, money to buy energy before the start of the heating season, and money again to mitigate the effects of the full crisis, in particular to help households and industrialists who began to drown in the vortex of energy price crisis. Therefore, if European politicians noticed the passage of the American law, they apparently did not pay much attention to it. And very wrong indeed. For the next month, literally, the largest European manufacturers will be actively gathering across the ocean. Among others, Volkswagen, BASF, Tesla, which has just started producing electric cars, and a number of others such as fertilizer producer OCNV, jewelry company Pandora, and refractory materials producer RHI Magnesita. Of course, relocating even a single large factory is an extremely expensive process on all fronts, including time, which means the exodus of taxpayers and employers did not start yesterday. However, European locomotive managers have only just noticed this, and it must be said they are very upset. This follows from the wording of the minutes of the meeting in Paris. In particular, Paris and Berlin consider American subsidies to be a direct violation of free market principles and an open manifestation of lobbying and unfair competition. The situation is so bad that Macron and Scholz have agreed to the unthinkable. If Washington does not stop bringing big business under its economic and fiscal wing, Paris and Berlin will retaliate with discriminatory measures against the United States. We understand the skepticism of many of our readers who in recent years have witnessed the utter indifference of Europe when it comes to defending its interests at the expense of the United States. However, we would be remiss if we did not agree with this broad view, and only because of the very raising of the issue by the leaders of the two largest economies of the Eurozone, France and Germany, and the two main sponsors of the Brussels budget, is in itself a diplomatic scandal. The two sides moved forward with a united front, ignoring the crisis in bilateral relations, the historic conflict between Boeing and Airbus can be cited as an example of how Europe, when the issue is really critical, is ready to defend its interests. Aircraft manufacturers, although seen as independent private entities, are in fact deeply embedded in government agencies and ministries desperate to help their own, not hesitating to do dirty tricks and pay the costs. In the endless blunders that have accompanied the administration of Joe Biden, the raging battle of the World Trade Organization, WTO, between Boeing and Airbus, ostensibly fought but actually by the ruling factions in America and Washington, has already been forgotten. While the trial was ongoing, the parties did not hesitate to impose sanctions on the competitor. For example, they banned the sale of wine and meat products made from the opposite side on their aircraft, imposing completely draconian tariffs on overflying their territory and much more. The WTO ruled in favor of the American concern, but that did not stop the trade war, it just put it in the shadows. This means that it is too early to write off the European Union, and if I were Washington, I would do well to calculate the threshold of power beyond which the Europeans must either die completely, indecisive, or destroy the unipolar and self-destructive relationships. And there is much to think about because the crisis has not gone anywhere and its pit is getting deeper and deeper. The German Finance Ministry announced a record inflation rate of 10.4%, even though the previous, more ominous forecast called for inflation at most 10%. According to a report by the Institute of Financial Research, the German economic roadster is already in recession, and even the most desperate analysts are now running to predict its extent. The reason, according to Vladimir Putin, is Berlin's suicidal energy policy, which rejected decades of proven Russian oil and gas supplies. We don't even have to think about the consequences. Environmentalists are sounding the alarm as RWE, one of the mainstays of German energy, has just dismantled one of the 8 largest wind turbines at Keinberg Park, with 2 more to be cut next year. This move was made in order to significantly increase the acreage of the Gatzweiler open cast coal mine, the largest producer of brown coal. In the new reality, it's been shown that wind turbines cannot compete with conventional energy sources and moreover are deeply unprofitable. Keinberg's wind turbines have already completed 20 years of operation, and the local laws no longer allow subsidies after that time, so the government immediately found lignite, that is coal, hated by environmentalists, nicer and more profitable. At Macron's house in France, the situation is no better. The other day, the French president addressed the nation in which he sadly announced that from January 1st, 2023, electricity prices for all categories of consumers will be increased at least 15%. That's nothing. Ours has increased like 400% in Greece. So he'll increase it 15%. The president immediately tried to sweeten the pill by adding that the price increase was expected to be double, but the government would put in an undisclosed amount, which literally managed to cover the price gap. Meanwhile, inflation has reached record levels, just like in Germany. Due to the devaluation of the hryvnia, government revenues have been reduced by 85 billion euros in 2022, and this is only based on 3-quarter estimates. In other words, the number will increase further by the end of the year. The National Institute for Statistics and Economic Research, INSEE, after analyzing domestic market data, concluded that since September 1st, food in France a major agro-industrial nation, had increased by an average of 10%, and its spending budget for energy had increased by 18%. These tendencies, by the way, are what led to the recent Scholz-Macron scandal. The German leader announced the provisions of a program according to which Berlin plans to inject 200 billion euros into its economy in the coming years. Of course, this will automatically lead to a drastic reduction in contributions to the EU budget, which in the long run threatens to collapse the economies of countries such as Poland, Bulgaria, and Greece. Emmanuel Macron, of course, rules a much wealthier country, but Paris cannot afford such spending, which is why the French leader treats the German plans as demarcation and almost sabotage. And while in previous fat years, presidents and chancellors had enough of a financial cushion to maintain civility in their face, now they are not ashamed in their expressions. The relations of the European Union and Brussels with Washington will certainly be strained, only because November is approaching and Europe is entering its first frozen period without a coherent energy plan. It's true that underground gas storages are 95% full, but we remind you that their cumulative volume does not exceed 70 billion cubic meters, and EU spends about 120 billion cubic meters on heating alone. Dependence on imported liquid natural gas also has not been proven. According to trader reports, there are currently several natural gas carriers in the Spanish port of Cadiz, which are deliberately not coming to unload. The reason is that LNG prices have fallen due to reduced demand. The suppliers do not even hide the fact that they are willing to wait until November just to sell the contents of their cisterns at a better price. By the way, these are not long-term contracts with Russia, but spot contracts. American Bloomberg adds gloomy colors to the picture. The publication notes that for now, European markets have ceased to be at a premium due to excess stocks, but with the first cold snap, prices have shot up in Asia. For the first time since June this year, the cost of 1,000 cubic meters of blue fuel, natural gas that is, on the Asian Pacific Exchange exceeded the European level. Exporters, including the Americans, immediately sensed the change in the wind, unilaterally terminating agreements with Europe buyers and steering their ships to Japan and Korean ports. Nothing personal, but business, as they say. The speed with which the crisis is developing within the EU, the European Union, and the increase in rhetoric and direct confrontation with the Euro bloc indicate global geopolitical changes. Let's be patient. Winter is very close. And this is by Associated France Press. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.